We do post
David,
these recordings.
Bill Lyons has his hand up.
Bill Lyons. Bill, jump in, Bill. Go on, Bill.
Yeah, David. Because Drew can't make it this Sunday, he's going to be at an assembly. We have an assembly too, but I'm on the West Coast. So I'm going to be at the Sunday meeting, Caroline's meeting, and we're going to read from the first edition, Bill Rudell's story, and then I'll do a little presentation about Bill Rudell.
Oh, very good. Thank you, Bill Lyons. Right, so back to tonight, we've got Gary Nyhard with us, the author of Bobby B, The Untold Story, which we've just finished, and he's also wrote a book on King Charles of New York City, Charles Towns, and we'll be hearing some about that tonight. But let's quickly go into a version of the set-aside prayer. We'll go in and we'll say that. If you'd like to join in, please do. If not, we're going to have another version of a little prayer coming up shortly after that, or saying. So using God as you understand, God, please help me to set aside
everything I think I know with an open mind
for a new understanding.
Amen.
Amen. And those who have no belief in anything other than, power of fellowship, serenity statement, if you'd like to say that, may I seek the serenity to accept things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom, of course, always to know the difference. And we just have a few moments silence to gather our thoughts, and we're always thinking of the alcoholics, and of course those who put this whole package together and helped us from going through the belladonna treatment. Thank you, sirs. Please, let's have a few moments silence, and the family members. Thank you. So thank you, everyone. Bill and the belladonna, we've got Gary Nyhard with us. Gary, I'm just going to read this quickly from the beginning, from the flyer we put up, and of course it's over to you then. So this is on the flyer. The belladonna treatment was introduced nationally by Dr. Alexander Lambert in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 1909. And Gary, I'll just say that, and I'll turn the meeting over to you. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you, Gary.
Okay. I'm Gary. I'm an alcoholic. And now, Bill and Belladonna. What got this started was basically some of the literature that I've come across in relatively recent times regarding belladonna. And it was while Bill W. was taking the belladonna cure at Towns Hospital that Wilson had his, quote, white light experience, unquote. A number of writers have attributed Wilson's, quote, white light, unquote, experience to the hallucinogenic events of belladonna. That's by Kenneth Anderson from a book, Sanitarium, Hospitals, and Belladonna Cure, which just was released in 2022. Quote, long before Mr. Towns touted his cure for alcoholism, belladonna, as well as henbane, was known to cause hallucinations. Belladonna hallucinations, on the other hand, are typically based on recent discussions the person had, but become far more fantastic. Many times these visions appear to fulfill the wishes one might have had during the inspiring experience. That's from a Dr. Howard Markel, and from an article that's An Alcoholic Savior, God, Belladonna, or Both. That dates from 2010. Another one, Towns' Belladonna Cure, which produced wild hallucinations, may have been responsible for several suicides. On January 5, 1915, 58-year-old Henry Corby threw himself out his window. On March 11th that same year, Walter A. Robinson went into the bathroom without supervision. A doctor and a nurse found Robinson halfway out the window. The doctor grabbed his bathrobe, but that was the only thing that he saved. Robinson fell 3 floors to his death. That was out of the Daytonian Manhattan, which is an article dated June 4th of 2019. It was of interest that Towns proclaimed that if you did the Towns treatment properly, that there were no restraints necessary on the patient. But here we have a couple of cases where the practice of using no restraints ended up with a couple of suicides. And this is actually 2 paragraphs from the same book, Silkworth by Dale Mitchell. Silkworth knew full well, this is from the recommendation of the book, Silkworth knew full well that Bill's hallucination of floating in a cloud with a bright light was brought on by the belladonna being used to treat withdrawal. When Bill asked Silkworth what was happening, the doctor could have told Bill the truth, and AA might never have been established. That's from a Bob L., also a doctor from St. Paul, Minnesota. And then from the author, Dale Mitchell, of the book Silkworth, what is also important to recognize when discussing the now famous Silkworth-Wilson discussion regarding his quote-unquote hot flash is not so much whether Wilson was hallucinating, but the way that the doctor handled the discussion. Dr. Silkworth told Bill he wasn't hallucinating, yet Bill's description of the white lights and his obsession with his image are a reflection of the belladonna-type hallucinations. DTs produce a steady stream of continuous and different hallucinations, keeping the alcoholic patient engulfed in the pains of withdrawal, busy focusing on the latest images. Belladonna, on the other hand, seems to produce only a couple of vibrant images and the mental capacity to focus on only one or two hallucinations at a time. Bill Wilson was treated with belladonna by Dr. Silkworth at Towns. His treatment is documented in Towns Hospital Case 1152 in December of 1934. Now, that Towns Hospital Case 1152, that numbering system had to have started sometimes probably with the arrival at Silkworth at Towns Hospital. Since they were at Towns Hospital, they were probably doing no less than 600 people a year. And the idea that this number is only 1152, this suggests that it's a numbering system that started with Silkworth. And that is an important clue in terms of interpreting the differences that you're going to be seeing between Silkworth and Towns. Now, much of this we're going to be starting off with is an article based on that was written by Glenn Chestnut, and just as part of his biography, a lifelong scholar. I'm literally next to somebody like Glenn, I'm just an interested amateur. But Glenn has quite a resume here. He received his Bachelor of Science in Physical Chemistry and Atomic Physics from the University of Louisville in 1960, graduating second in his class. The man was bright, no doubt. Studying at Southern Methodist University, he earned a bachelor, BD, I don't know what that is, from Perkins School of Theology in 1964, and finally a Doctor of Philosophy from Oxford University in 1971. That's no small accomplishment. Professor Chestnut taught at the University of Virginia at Boston University, and from 1970 on at Indiana University in South Bend, where he retired as Professor of History and Religious Studies in 2003. Glenn was the recipient of numerous academic awards, including a Fulbright Fellowship to Oxford with Dempster and Rockefeller Fellowships there, a Prix de Rome, which allowed him to spend a year as a Fellow of the American Academy in Rome, and a Herman Frederick Lieber Teaching Award at Indiana University. He was also a key contributor and manager of the email group Alcoholics Anonymous History Lovers for many years. That got started in 2002, and he was an integral part of that along with Nancy Olson, who passed away. He took it over. He didn't end up passing on the baton, but there's I probably have 14,000 emails that came out of AA History Lovers. I was a member also. And here are some, Glenn died just as the pandemic was ramping up in the mid 2020, but I am absolutely convinced that had he survived, he would be he might be doing this presentation in place of me. But you can see these are just 6 of the books that he, the one on the right on Father Ed Dowling I have. I just bought a little while ago The Higher Power, which is on the lower right, which is an interesting subject in that it's the 12-step program for believers and non-believers. And then one of his most well-known books, actually, and very popular in recent times, is Heroes of Early Black AA, because I think he single-handedly uncovered that Father Ed was helpful in January of 1945 in creating the first black meeting in the United States, followed by Chicago in soon afterwards, and that actually what we thought was the first black meeting in Washington, D.C. is in fact third. Well, that is a direct result of Glenn Chestnut's research. But you can see also very, very talented, and this is just a sample of the books that he produced in his lifetime. But what we're here to do is to talk about Bill Wilson's Visions of Light at Towns Hospital, and this is his title of his pamphlet on this subject. So Bill W. was admitted to Towns Hospital once in the autumn of 1933 and 3 more times in 1934, around July probably, and then on September 17th and December 11th. It was most likely during the first 1934 stay that Bill W. met Dr. William Duncan Silkworth for the first time. As Bill describes this in the Big Book on page 7, quote, I was placed in a nationally known hospital for the mental and physical rehabilitation of alcoholics. Under the so-called belladonna treatment, my brain cleared. Best of all, I met a kind doctor who explained that though certainly selfish and foolish, I had been seriously ill bodily and mentally. Bill Wilson employed an odd phrase here. And again, this is Glenn Chestnut. The so-called belladonna treatment. Why did he use the word, quote, so-called, unquote? Was it because even though ordinary people in New York still referred colloquially to, quote, taking the belladonna treatment at Towns, unquote, patients were no longer necessary being given belladonna? Or was it because even if they were not given very much belladonna, and only for as long as they seemed on the verge of going in delirium tremens? The reader needs to be strongly warned that a good many of the statements in AA histories about the medical treatment which Bill W. was given when he was admitted to the hospital are still based on what is known about the bizarre early theories held by Charles B. Towns, the man who had founded the hospital in 1901. That's not true. It was 1909. Towns, but that dates with Towns. That's not Chestnut's fault. That's Towns exaggerating. Along with AMA journal articles written by Dr. Alexander Lambert in 1909 and 1913, a physician who Towns brought in to give medical credence to his strange ideas. Well, actually, with regards to Towns and his strange ideas, Lambert was on board with the Towns treatment as many as 5 years before 1909. The fact of the matter is that despite the lack of education that Towns had, medical science had no idea whatsoever in what to do with alcoholics. We got to remember we have any number of stories, even at the AA number 3, and how he was terrorizing nurses, and when it's part of his drunks, Bill Dotson. And a lot of hospitals didn't want anything to do with drunks, simply because they were just so unruly and undisciplined and unpredictable, and would do all sorts of bizarre things. And one of the things about the Towns treatment is that it minimized that kind of behavior. And that's what Dr. Alexander Lambert, I think that's what hooked him, and also what hooked Dr. Cabot up in Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Massachusetts Hospital, So that was the hook, but nevertheless, Chestnut thinks the original Towns Lambert treatment was quite appalling. Every hour, day and night, for 50 hours, that is, for a little over 2 days, the patient was given a mixture of belladonna, Hedenbane, and prickly ash. And you bet that was bizarre. No question that even waking up the patient every hour or so for 50 hours, that is as much of a punishment as it is for being a drunk and going underneath the treatment in the first place. But the idea, again, was to keep the patient in a state of delirium. And so, in other words, the treatment was evolved into having a couple of nicknames. One of them was a puke and purge, and the other one was diarrhea, delirium, and that's a good word to remember, diarrhea, delirium, and damnation. The Townes treatment, this is back to Chestnut. Every 12 hours, the patient was given cathartics, medicines that accelerate defecation. Dr. Kellogg was big in having defecation occur regularly if you were raising children. That was basically the medicine of the enema. If Johnny wasn't going to have a regular bowel movement at any time, at the same time every day, it was to be induced. And that was the Dr. Spock of the times. That was the thinking that you could get rid of disease by having the body purged of its waste. That was, again, that is not only the Townes treatment, that was the quote unquote wisdom of the day. And after abundant stools were being produced, castor oil was administered to completely clean out the intestinal tract. The doctor, there had to be multiple doctors to go for 50 hours with a patient, gave the patient very small amounts of the belladonna mixture until the first symptoms of belladonna poisoning began to appear. Atropine, which is contained in scopolamine, also are eventual poisons if they're taken in too large quantities. That is, when the face becomes flushed and the throat dry and the pupils in the eye dilated. The doctor then stopped the belladonna until the symptoms had disappeared, then began giving the belladonna again until the symptoms reappeared. In an endless cycle through the first 50 hours. It was quite literally, this is Chestnut, a witch's brew, because belladonna and henbane had been used for centuries by witches, sorcerers, and shamans to produce scary drug-induced mental states. I don't know this for sure, but if you go back to the oracle at Delphi, it's very possible that the babbling women, that the expert men were interpreting what the babbling was. It's very possible that it was belladonna that was part of what the young ladies were being fed. But this was 1934, a whole generation later. Townes' theories had now fallen out of popularity. That was true by 1920. Lambert had broken his association with Townes, and a totally new figure, Dr. William Duncan Silkworth, was now the hospital's medical director. Townes had insisted vociferously that the medical doctors were wrong and that alcoholism was not a disease. Actually, Townes vacillated on that subject depending upon what the economic prospects seemed to be. Silkworth, on the other hand, insisted that alcoholism was an illness, quote, an obsession of the mind that condemns one to drink and an allergy of the body that condemns one to die, unquote. And he had devised an entirely different method of treating incoming patients, which he described in 1937. The first phase of the Silkworth treatment was as follows, and even this was used only for those who were in an acute crisis stage where delirium tremens was imminent, and was used only for as long as the patient seemed to still be in danger. 1, about an ounce of alcohol every 4 hours with an occasional ounce in between if symptoms are growing worse. 2, to relieve the pressure in the brain and the spinal cord unless spinal puncture is contemplated. This is not terribly complimentary to Silkworth because this sounds like Dr. Coles, who was at the time, he wrote a book in 1941 that employed spinal taps as part of dealing with alcoholism, and that on the theory that was too much pressure in the brain, and the only way to relieve the pressure was through spinal taps. Dehydration must be began at once by using a cathartic, a substance that accelerates defecation, and a purgative, a laxative to loosen the stool and ease defecation. So Silkworth has that part of his treatment in common with Townes. If there is an enlargement of the liver, high colonic irrigations of warm saline should be used instead. Dehydration is continued from 3 to 4 days. Sleep must be induced. Sleep was very important to Silkworth. Morphine should be avoided if at all possible. And what must be especially avoided is a combination of alcohol and sedative, which results in a state of mental confusion, leading to hallucinosis. Sedatives should be, quote, given in moderation, not enough to cause sudden, quote, knockout, unquote. And at this time, Silkworth belladonna was basically considered to be one of the sedatives. 4. On about the 4th day, the alcohol can be entirely withdrawn, and by this time the crisis has been avoided or safely passed through, and hence the patient is in the second phase of the treatment. Note that the Knickerbocker Hospital, which opened later in 1945, you only had 5 days for the entire treatment at Knickerbocker. That was under Silkworth's direction as well. Silkworth did not say what kind of sedatives he used, except to note that almost never used morphine and that he administered only the minimum amount necessary to calm the patient down and make the patient so he could gently drift off to sleep. You were not trying to knock the patients out, he warned, and you wanted to avoid anything that would produce mental confusion or hallucinations. And the underlines are mine. And you wanted to avoid anything that would produce mental confusion or hallucinations. This is actually Dr. Silkworth's Knickerbocker Hospital treatment beginning in 1945. And on the left-hand column, you can see on administration, you have the 2nd day, the 3rd and 4th day, and the 5th day. This phenobarbital, and this is where actually someday if I can get an MD to actually look at this stuff, I don't know what most of them are. Anyway, the B and C mixture is basically, you see, is the sodium bromide and chloral hydrate, which is on the explained on the right. We have vitamins, thiamine and chloride, and you can see that is heavy duty on the first day for the first 12 hours. The treatment for the 5 days is relatively similar, but if you start to see that there's nothing here that is refers to belladonna. Now, mind you, this is now 1945, and in the Silkworth book or in any other source that I've been able to find out, we don't have in Silkworth's words what his treatment actually was. We have Glenn Chestnut talking about what he thinks the treatment was, but we don't have actually a treatment like this. This is out of the Dale Mitchell book as well. This is the additional function of what to do in case there's vomiting, and there we get belladonna to help with vomiting in that case. There's a lot of abbreviations here which don't make any sense to me at all. And maybe someplace diarrhea, they got kaopectate. Sleep. Most important for the first 2 days, and the sleep will again deal with avoiding the delirium tremens. And then you can see again the sodium chloride and sodium bicarbonate to deal with excitability and nervousness. And then we have a note, it's very important to establish routine and adhere to it with no exception. DTs occurred 3 to 5 days after withdrawal of alcohol and no sleep. So sleep is probably one of the absolute necessities according to Silkworth, and they were trying to encourage that from the patient basically as a fundamental part of the treatment. Bill Wilson on the white light. In my own reading of the literature from the period, this is Chestnut again. In my own reading of the literature from that period, the commonest sedatives used to calm down alcoholics were formaldehyde, barbiturates, colloquially called goofballs, bromides, chloral hydrate, colloquially called a Mickey or a Mickey-Fin, and codeine. Belladonna was normally spoken of as a sedative only in certain specialized cases, such as whooping cough and Parkinson's disease. Nevertheless, at Knickerbocker Hospital in New York City, where Dr. Silkworth was also involved, even as late as 1952, we read of alcoholics who showed signs of going into delirium tremens being given bromides and belladonna for their jagged nerves. But even if Dr. Silkworth were still giving some of his patients belladonna, those who showed symptoms of going into violent delirium tremens, the dosage could not have been very high. Belladonna was quite literally a standard ingredient in witches' brews. This is again blood chestnut, and was not something that you gave people to make them gently and pleasantly drowsy so they could drift off to sleep. Giving people belladonna could sometimes knock them out for a while, but the delirium it produced was even more apt to make them disruptive and uncontrollable. They would often compulsively repeat bizarre actions and frequently could not even be made to sit still. This is somewhat in contradiction to, let's say, Bill Dotson's experience in Akron. This was not what Dr. Silkworth was. This was what Dr. Silkworth was trying to prevent, and that was to prevent bizarre actions and being unable to sit still. The object, as Silkworth explained in his 1937 article, was to normalize the alcoholic's mind and mood so you could then start to talk sense to them and attempt to get them to make a rational decision with full intellectual commitment to stay away from alcohol permanently from that point on. Drug-crazed patients hallucinating and imagining things, swearing mighty oaths that they were never going to drink again just to impress the doctor with how, quote, sincere, unquote, they were. In Dr. Silkworth's experience, just went back to drinking again the moment they left the hospital. Dr. Silkworth knew all these things. He wasn't some Charles B. Towns character with a quack cure for alcoholism, which he was peddling. And again, with the quack cure remark of, with the remark of Chestnut with regards to Towns, keep in mind that for at least 2.5 years, Charles Towns, with his 8th grade education, was publishing monthly articles in the most prestigious medical journals in the country. Why? Because the traditional medicine didn't know the foggiest of what to do with alcoholics. And because Towns had this ability to more or less normalize and or sedate and have it look like the experience of getting off of alcohol was relatively painless. That was the hook that more or less convinced Lambert, Dr. Lambert, and Dr. Cabot that this was a good thing, or at a minimum, in either case, these prestigious doctors didn't have any better idea. Okay, so using the term quack cure is a mistake as far as I'm concerned, because that's Monday morning quarterback. It's using today's knowledge to try to judge the best things that people knew back in the 1910s. And actually, when you get around to doing a presentation, and incidentally, I've done another presentation altogether with the cures that there were for alcoholism back then. The Towns treatment doesn't look that bad. I think the epitome is the lobotomy. And when you recognize how the lobotomy was done with a rather crude tool that went through the eye socket and went into the brain and ended up scraping at random, my heavens, I can't imagine anyone ever did anything like that. But that was a fellow that did that had his own lobotomobile that would go around the country doing lobotomies, and I believe he treated 4,000 people that way. So I mean, when you come up to alternatives to what treatment of Towns, in many regards, doesn't look that bad. But if we use today's knowledge on the belladonna treatment, it can look like a quack cure. At any rate, on December 11th, 1934, Bill W. went to Towns Hospital for the fourth and last time. As he says in the big book, quote, treatment seemed wise, for I showed signs of delirium tremens, unquote. But his condition was apparently not all that serious, because once he had been checked into the hospital, Dr. Silkworth seems to have done little more than give him enough of some sort of sedative to make him drowsy. As Bill reported later, the diagnosis was that, quote, I was not in too awful a condition. In 3 or 4 days, I was free of what little sedative they gave me, but I was very depressed, unquote. This was from Bill W.'s own account of what happened as given by him in 1955, which have to serve as the standard for judging later secondary accounts. That is, again, Glenn Chestnut's observation. Was he then given belladonna? As we have seen, he may have been, or he may not have been. We just do not know for sure. But if he was given belladonna, it would not have been very much, because Dr. Silkworth, as opposed to Charles Towns and Dr. Alexander a generation earlier, was simply trying to relax and calm his patients. But suppose belladonna was administered to Bill W. The next major confusion in the modern literature on his vision of light arises from the fact that belladonna is listed in medical sources as, quote, a hallucinogen, unquote. People who know very little about the pharmacology and symptomatology of mood-altering drugs do not realize that what are called hallucinogenic drugs fall into 3 quite different categories, and that belladonna and henbane do not give you a joy-filled visions of glorious divine light that leave you feeling at peace with yourself and the world. And incidentally, if you don't, if you need to be convinced, Google 3 types of hallucinogens, and you'll come up with what is going to be presented here. The first one is dissociatives, are one class of hallucinogens. This is Glenn Chestnut, are one class of hallucinogens which produce a feeling of being unreal or totally disconnected from oneself, or a kind of derealization in which the outside world seems completely unreal. This is not a pleasant or life-affirming experience, but is extremely unnerving and disturbing to the person undergoing it. Those, again, that's dissociatives. Psychedelics have a very different effect, the second kind. These drugs include LSD, psilocybin from magic mushrooms, and mescaline from peyote buds. At low doses, the effects can be similar to those produced by meditation and trance states. At higher doses, the drug takers can experience the warping and distorting of shapes and surfaces and strange alterations in color. Some people see repetitive geometric shapes. Some people have experienced what they believe to be higher spatial temporal dimensions. Some people take psychedelics, claim on some associations that the drug put them into contact with God, the infinite, or some other kind of divine realm, and that it was a profound and inspiring religious experience. And all I can say from back in my hippy-dippy days in the last 60s and early 70s, when the moon is in the 7th house and Jupiter is aligned with Mars, you might do all sorts of things that you, as a bizarre young man, might do with that stuff. You never know. But I will say that when you wake up in the morning, you can't remember what you did. Then, if Bill Wilson had been given a psychedelic at Towns Hospital in December of 1934, it is possible that his vision of light could have been drug-induced. But Sandoz Laboratories did not start producing LSD as a psychiatric drug until 13 years later in 1947, and Bill W. himself did not take LSD until August 29 of 1956. He did meet Aldous Huxley earlier, but there's no record whatsoever. Aldous Huxley was experimenting with mescaline along the similar lines, but there's no evidence whatsoever that Bill ever did any kind of mescaline. And this October 29th, 1956 is post St. Louis, when Bill himself thought that he had handed over the program to the fellowship at St. Louis, and that he felt that he was free to experiment and do whatever he thought. He was going to learn that some other people had a whole lot of different ideas on how much freedom he actually was allowed. And here we go with the third kind. Deliriants are not at all like psychedelics. They produce a state of delirium. Deliriants include belladonna, deadly nightshade, Hyoscyamus niger, henbane, and Datura stramonium, Jimson weed, which contain the alkaloids atropine, scopolamine, and hyoscyamine. In case of the deliriants, the drug takers fall into a stupor or a state of complete mental confusion. They may be unable to recognize their own image in a mirror. They may start mechanically taking their clothes off or plucking at themselves. Sometimes they hold long conversations with completely imaginary people. Some of the effects can be terrifying and extremely unpleasant. People who have taken drugs in this category sometimes describe the experience as being like going insane, going totally mad in a very bad and unpleasant way. Governments, this is Chestnut, classic Chestnut, governments do not pass laws against people taking deliriants because it's unnecessary. The effects are so unpleasant that no one would use any of these drugs repeatedly for recreational purposes. I'm not sure if no one ever has done that. This might be one of those rarely, but I don't know anyone in my experience of being around this program that went to a treatment center because of belladonna, or anything like it. Maybe somebody in the Q&A can enlighten me on that. The hallucinogenic experience in delirium produced particularly by anticholinergic, I still can't spit that one out. Anticholinergic, they're drugs that block the action of acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter or a chemical messenger. It transfers signals between certain cells to affect how your body functions. It's characterized by stupor, agitation, confusion, confabulation, making up basically parts of an event that you can't remember, so you make up what you can't remember. Emotional bluntness, dysphoria, or state of unease, memory deficits, incoherency of thoughts, hypoactivity or hyperactivity, mixed delirium, lucid intervals, akathisia, and inability to stay still, realistic visual hallucinations or illusions as opposed to pseudo-hallucinations experienced on other classes of hallucinogens, and regression to, quote, phantom, unquote, behaviors such as disrobing, plucking, or interacting with imaginary objects or scenes. The effects of these kinds of anticholinergic compounds have also been likened to delirious fevers, sleepwalking, fugue states, or psychotic episodes in that subject has minimal control over their actions and may have little or no recollection of the experiences afterwards. Now, this is not Silkworth. This is actually from an Emory University PhD. So this was actually a modern explanation of hallucinogens. And you can notice that I am not even going to try to pronounce some of these. But under the hallucinogens, you can see mescaline, peyote, psilocybin, and LSD. You can also see the dissociants. Okay. But the delirium, the delirium ones are not listed. Why? Because nobody's doing them. That's why. That's what the gentleman told me. They just don't have any occasion of psychiatrists or having encountering any of those, because nobody wants to have or voluntarily have the experience or involuntarily decides to repeatedly use the stuff. So what happened to Bill W. on December 14th, 1934 was as unexpected to Dr. Silkworth as it was to Bill. If Bill had been given belladonna and then had been given psychologically turned into a numb and stumbling zombie, this is Chestnut, Dr. Silkworth would have said, oops, I gave him a bit too much of the belladonna. All I wanted to do was to stop him shaking so much, unquote. But that was not what happened at all. Bill Wilson. For the first time, Bill described his vision of light in any detail was while talking to the AA International Convention in St. Louis in 1955. So I used this for a basic statement of what happened. Quote, in 3 or 4 days, I was free of what little sedative they gave me, but I was very depressed, unquote. And after a brief visit from Ebby, Bill said that, quote, my depression deepened unbearably, and finally it seemed to me as though I were at the bottom of a pit. All at once I found myself crying out, quote, if there is a God, let him show himself. I'm ready to do anything, anything. Suddenly the room lit up with a great white light. I was caught up into an ecstasy which there is no words to describe. It seemed to me in the mind's eye that I was on a mountain, and that a wind not of air but of spirit was blowing. And then it burst upon me that I was a free man. Slowly the ecstasy subsided. I lay on the bed, but now for a time I was in another world, a new world of consciousness. All about me and through me there was a wonderful feeling of presence. And I thought to myself, quote, so this is the God of the preachers, unquote. A great peace stole over me, and I thought, quote, no matter how wrong things seem to be, they are still all right. Things are all right with God and this world, unquote. There was another reference here to the book of Acts in the New Testament, not to the conversion of Paul in this case, this is Chestnut, but to the story of the first Pentecost, Acts 2, 1 through 4. This was the occasion in the New Testament story on which the disciples were given the power and the mission to spread the message to people of all languages of the world. And it was the occasion in Bill W.'s story on which he felt the sense of being sent by God to spread the healing message to alcoholics of languages all over the world. And when the day of Pentecost had come, this is out of the Bible, they were all together in one place, and suddenly a sound came from heaven like the rush of a mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared to them the tongues as of fire distributed and resting on each one of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. It seems to be at this vision, at this moment, this was the idea, call it what you will, that Bill had the idea, had the blessing or whatever it's called, of sharing this message of how to communicate with alcoholics. And the emphasis is on sharing being the key ingredient. Bill Wilson said in another account that he felt at, quote, one with the universe, unquote. And the account given in Pass It On, the 1984 biography of Bill W., is also useful to look at because it gives a bit more detail about his mental state after the vision was over. Savoring my new world, I remained in the state for a long time. I seemed to be possessed by the absolute and curious conviction deepened that no matter how wrong these things seemed to be, there could be no question about the ultimate rightness of God's universe. For the first time, I felt that I really belonged. I thank my God who had given me a glimpse of his absolute self. Even though a pilgrim upon an uncertain highway, I need be concerned no more, for I had glimpsed the great beyond, unquote. Bill Wilson had just had his 39th birthday, and he still had his half of his life ahead of him. He always said that after that experience, he never again doubted the existence of God. He never took another drink. Stepping Stones has recently provided quite a few letters online. And if you look around at Stepping Stones, there's a letter that Bill wrote to Silkworth without a precise date, but it's before this. It's before Bill got sober. It's writing about somebody else that got sober, but it's a kind of a caustic, sarcastic letter that Bill wrote to Silkworth saying, well, this guy got sober, but I haven't yet, and you can, I can't quote it. And of course, the thing is under copyright, but you look at that letter that was written roughly 3 months before this event, this white light event, and then you get this happening to Bill, and Bill remembering that this is what it is. This is a, whatever you want to call it, it is a significant event in which his life changed, no doubt. Bill Wilson not only never drank again, he made a decision to spend the rest of his life helping other alcoholics, and stuck by that decision to his life's end. At one level, there was nothing new that he learned in that experience. At some level, he had known everything he really needed to know about spirituality since he was a small child, listening to the preacher's voice from outside the church, and knowing at some level that he really should start acting the way the preacher was telling him, but not yet being deeply enough impressed by it for it is actually have any major effect on his long-term continuing behavior in the world. Now in December 1934, he finally, quote, saw the light, unquote, and realized that this was the most important thing in the world. The proof that his change of heart was genuine was that he changed his whole life, and that the change it produced was not temporary, but permanent. What is most important of all, however, is that Bill W.'s psychic change was based upon contact with something real and eternal, which he could not only describe as intuitive presence of something infinite and eternal, extending into a dimension totally outside our material world, but it also permeating the entire cosmos with a light which illuminated everything which was good and beautiful. No matter how desperate our situation, when we let ourselves become fully aware of this divine presence to a great enough degree, we could abruptly cease feeling overwhelmed by the fear of death, and we would find ourselves given the power to face whatever we were called to do. In Bill Wilson's case, this meant being given the power to stop drinking and the resolution and force of character to found a great spiritual movement, which was going to spread all over the world, bring serenity, grace, and new life to this troubled planet. And these are some of Silkworth's articles, and if you go ahead and explore them, I have read them as a result during my homework for this presentation. And guess what? Belladonna is not mentioned in any of the articles. None of them. In one of the few instances that Silkworth and Todd's agreed on anything, they treated wet drunks with medication so they could avoid the hallucinations that came with delirium tremens. Again, that was the intent of both of their treatments, but their treatments were not the same. So this is Easy Does It. It's a book that's kind of hard to find, and this is the first departure. Almost all the text that you've seen previously this came directly from Glenn Chestnut. But on pages 159 to 160, well, Silkworth, who ghost wrote Easy Does It, and he in the book he is actually represented as a Dr. Goodrich. Dr. Goodrich gave his versions of Bill's hot flash. There is no reference to medication of any kind in the book. But this is the closest to an eyewitness account that we have. And this is out of Silkworth's book. Bill's previous concept of God he had dismissed long ago as being distasteful, if not unreasonable, and along with it, any thought of God at all. Ebby made only the simple statement of how the newly found knowledge applied to himself, how it worked for him. Included in his talk, however, further points of the plan that he was using in his personal life, such as making direct amends to the persons he had harmed in his drinking career. When his friend had gone, Bill felt a kind of turbulent but blind realization of the magnitude and importance of the simple truth that his friend had stated. He was greatly moved. Bill, the agnostic, who thought he didn't know God, begged for help, for divine revelation. Quote, "Oh God," unquote, he said in desperation, quote, "if there is a God, show me what to do," unquote. Then Bill had a strange experience. He seldom talks about it in public, which was true when this was written in 1950. Suddenly, the room seemed to be filled with a blinding light, a light such as you see in religious paintings, I guess, or like the light St. Paul saw as the Bible describes it. Anyway, in the brilliance of this light, Bill saw himself in his relationship to God. Anyway, in the brilliance of this light, Bill saw himself in his relationship to God. He felt also that a great burden was lifted from him. He was flooded with a strange sense of peace. Bill said that he didn't know how long this extraordinary experience lasted. But when it was over, he was frightened and sent for the physician in charge. He was an old friend of Bill. Upon hearing of this strange experience, another physician might have thought Bill was beginning to show symptoms of paranoia and wonder if he should lock Bill up. Or he might have thought that they had cut off Bill's liquor too sharply, even though he had now been sober for about 4 days, and that he was suffering from alcoholic hallucinations. But instead, our doctor asked Bill a lot of questions. When Bill had finished answering them, the doctor thought for a while and said gravely, quote, "Bill, I don't know what happened to you, but whatever it was good. You have something now that you didn't have before. Hang on to it." I might add that in a variety of religious experiences, there are documented white light experiences that took place in the New York area. The founder of the water mission, and I'm going blank on his name for the moment, who had his white light experience in Sing Sing prison. Jerry McCauley was his name. And then Samuel Hadley, who actually took over the Water Street mission after his own white light experience. And both of those people are mentioned on page 181, A Variety of Religious Experiences by William James, which Bill apparently is supposed to have devoured. Some people think he just read the chapter on conversions. But it might not be a bad thing if you have that book, or you can get the PDF. You might, rather than read the whole thing, read the chapter on conversions and see what you think. But this is me. Okay, Bill's hot flash at Towns Hospital. Some try to attribute Bill's hot flash to the belladonna treatment. The assertion is considered an error resulting from confusing Silkworth with Towns, combined with a lack of knowledge regarding belladonna. Silkworth did not employ the discredited Towns Lambert puke and purge. He had his own ideas. Attributing Bill's hot flash to belladonna risks being an insult to the memory of Silkworth. He was his own man with his own solutions. He should not be convicted. He was the medical director. Towns, when Silkworth was hired in either 1929, 1930, or 1932. Towns in 1932 was 70 years old and turning over the reins of the day-to-day activities to his medical directors, and that was Silkworth. And Towns did not supervise Silkworth. So it just is a confusion and equating just because it was Towns Hospital that the treatment was the same. Well, guess what? It wasn't. After all, if the belladonna treatment could provide such a life-changing, positive, cataclysmic event, would not Charles Towns, the ultimate BSer that I've come across in terms of making claims that turned out to be not true, already been advertising that virtue for decades? He, the one who could stretch the truth beyond breaking point to promote his hospital, never advertised or reported anything by a patient over almost 40 years that even remotely resembled a hot flash. or the experience of a white light that was from, quote, a god of the preachers. Towns remained agnostic while AA blossomed right in front of his eyes. Among the thousands upon thousands of patients treated with belladonna, Wilson is the only documented white light positive vision. Belladonna, a deliriant, was used to help the patient avoid delirium tremens and the possible horrific hallucinations that accompanied a wet drunk drying out and DTs, which sometimes proved fatal. So, conclusion. Consider Bill's white light event was precisely what he and his physicians said it was. Let's go back to the original three quotes that started this. It was while Bill W. was taking the belladonna cure. A number of writers we have here. Who? All right, I've supplied a couple. Who? But I will tell you with anything that I've written, and whenever I make an assertion like that, I have backup, footnotes, endnotes, and I can say to you, don't blame me. I got that information from so-and-so, and he's the one that said, well, guess what? These accusations are totally in what, as I'm concerned, are in the air. In other words, they are statements, but they don't have a person or people or documentation or dates or anything else behind the accusations. But sometimes we, unfortunately, can be more or less sold, or we honestly can believe what people end up writing without the proper documentation of what they have behind it. So, so that is by and large what is occurring. Now, with the third one here, the wild hallucinations, yes, that is what happened at Towns Hospital, but that's old news. That is not Silkworth and has nothing to do with Silkworth whatsoever, but still, it's the kind of thing that is 25 years off in time, but can be used to somehow give a flavor to what happened to Bill, that somehow it was a result of a substance. And incidentally, just as for the heck of it, I decided I would get on Online Grapevine, and I'm giving you an advertisement for the Online Grapevine, which I find to be very helpful. Do a search on belladonna. You only come up with three things. Okay. And, it looks like with these 1954, we got two from 1954 and one from 1965. This is all Knickerbocker Hospital and doesn't have anything to do with Towns. But you can, in the first one there, and also, Silkworth was big on vitamins. So you can see the vitamin B1, but nevertheless, there's that word, belladonna, right? But it is, again, we don't have the horrific puke and purge going on. And then 5 days and 5 nights spent in the alcoholic ward, that's typical. You can see belladonna and sedatives and feeding and recuperation. But it has nothing to do with and incidentally, Dr. Bob used some belladonna in Akron. I'm not exactly sure under what circumstances, but that's documented in Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers. And historians of note, Ernest Kurtz, probably, who wrote Not God, there's no mention of belladonna. Bill W., Francis Hartigan, Bill's experience at Towns Hospital, there's no mention of belladonna. My name is Susan Cheevers. No, belladonna is not considered to be a cause. And then we have Robert Thompson in 1965, really the first biography about Bill, and describing this was not the worst drunk he'd been on, and after a few days of sedatives, belladonna, and a massive quantity of vitamins, his physical being seemed restored, his mind cleared, but as the boozy fog lifted, a great black depression, the worst one of his life, gradually settled over him. And then Silkworth went on to explain that Bill had probably undergone some tremendous psychic upheaval. Gossip. Defined as casual or unconstrained conversation or reports about other people, typically involving details that are not confirmed as being true. Unquote. Hearsay. quote, information received from other people that one cannot adequately substantiate, or a rumor, unquote. Let's just face facts. The problem with Alcoholics Anonymous is that its members are alcoholics. Consequently, our fellowship has been filled with beliefs that in the end aren't so. No, St. Francis did not write the 11th-step prayer. Boy, that's a tough one, too. No, Herbert Spencer did not write contempt prior to investigation. I believe we can safely conclude that Bill W.'s hot flash was not because of belladonna. Nevertheless, expect that assertion to be repeated ad infinitum simply because you cannot tell an alcoholic anything, but you cannot tell him much. And of course, with the other kind of, the Bill, and my heavens, I don't even want to get started with the alleged sexual escapades. I heard the most recently that, he and Bill was having some sort of affair with Ruth Hawk. And, you name a woman and somebody's going to make up a fact that Bill had some sort of affair with her, you can bet. But Bill Wilson's letter to William Silkworth on December 25th, 1949, thanking the doctor for the words during Bill's final treatment that, quote, saved my life. Dear Doctor, December 25th, 1949. And no other time does Christmas reminds us of our friends. None come more quickly to recollection than you and your good wife. Surely great things have happened since that day 15 years ago when you said, no, you're not hallucinating. You'd better hold on to what you have. That saved my life. And this is a letter of appreciation from Lois and me. What you have since meant to so many, no one can measure. You are among the first of those without whom AA could never have been. Lois joins me in eternal gratitude. And that's Bill. And this is actually out of a tribute that Bill wrote trying to raise money for Silkworth's wife after Silkworth passed on March 22nd of 1951. There was a time years ago when the destiny of Alcoholics Anonymous was held in the hands of one man, Dr. William Duncan Silkworth. It was then that he declared my own spiritual experience to be a reality and not an hallucination. That was again from the memorial from Bill on Silkworth's Memorial Fund. But Bill, and this is the way he viewed things in a letter that was written to Mel Barger on July 2nd of 1956. In his own words, Bill, of course, these spiritual experiences are as old as man himself. In fact, I know of several sudden ones in AA that quite eclipse my own for intensity. In talking about my flash of reality, I often fail to make the point that every AA who has the program gets the same thing. The only difference that I can see is that most experiences are strung out over a long period of time. In these sudden events, I think the ego gives way at depth in complete collapse, at least momentarily. This permits a huge inrush of grace that brings a vision. In most cases, that grace leaks in little by little. Therefore, I can't hold with most theologians that these sudden experiences are something very special and unique. If you were to take the sum of your own transformation since you have been in AA and condense the whole business into 6 minutes, you too would see the stars. Thank you for letting me share.
Well, thank you. That's been an absolute pleasure to listen to, Gary. Please, everyone, I believe you can unmute. Rob, can people unmute there? I believe you can, everyone. Thank you very much. You can.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary.
Absolutely stunning work.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Gary. Wow.
That is a wow, isn't it? That is a wow.
Great job, Gary.
Thank you, Gary.
Right, we've been listening to Gary Neihart, the author of Bobby B, The Untold Story, and of course King Charles of New York City. Rob, I think, is going to put Gary's email in the chat. I think, Gary, if that's okay, people want to contact you to get into a deeper conversation. But we're going to kind of keep it general tonight, if that's okay with everyone. I know there's great issues being discussed tonight, but if you could keep it general, within reason. If Gary wants to go in deeper with you, that's fair enough, but we'll take Gary's lead on that. So let's go into that, and if you've got a question, could you raise your virtual hand or wave at Rob or myself and we'll call on you. And I think we've got Hugh H is jumping in first, Top of the Hill Group.
Yes, I'm an alcoholic. My name's Hugh Hyatt. These are not general questions. They're two specific questions. But I'm not quite sure what you meant, David, about being general. Gary, you had a date of December 14th of 1934 for the date of Bill's white light experience. Where did you get that date from?
Chestnut.
Okay. And Silkworth Memorial Fund?
Yes.
Didn't that start out as a retirement fund so he and his wife could move to Connecticut or something?
Yes.
Okay. It only became a memorial fund because he died.
Correct. Before they could raise enough money for them to, for him to be able to retire, because he was still working I think he died at the age of 78.
Great presentation. I learned a lot.
Thank you, Hugh. I think, Hugh, general is we shown a general way what it used to be like, what happened, and what it's like now. I'm using that, I think, as a basis. But we're going up to Ontario to Bernadette.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Gary. What a great presentation. Little simple question. In St. Thomas Hospital in Akron, when Dr. Bob set up the little treatment area there, would there have been any medications or anything for the detoxing of the guys that came in there? And how long would they have been there? I think they came 7 days. Any information about that?
Well, you caught me a little off guard. My focus has basically been on Silkworth and what's going on in New York. But
apologies.
Bob had his own means of treating alcoholics, and some of them were rather bizarre. I can't stand sauerkraut. And then and there were other kinds of foods they would have you eat. And mind you, it was the story is entirely different. Much of the therapy that Dr. Bob employed was throwing people at him, and having people come in and talking to and I think Clarence Snyder had as many as 20 people come in and tell him that's entirely contrary to what was going on at Towns Hospital, where privacy was at one time was everything, and actually Wilson being able to go around and talk to patients at Towns Hospital as a former patient himself was absolutely revolutionary. And that is evidence of that the people around Bill, Lois knew he was a new man. She knew it at sight, and so did Silkworth, and so did Lambert. They allowed then Bill to be acting like a lay therapist, more or less, and dealing with, he had no immediate successes, but one of the tasks I've given to Drew Hendrick is to, if you go to the 3 Talks of Medical Societies, go to page 26. And when Bill was making his presentation in 1944, he talks of the 75 failures, but the 63 successes of the 75 failures. Some of those 63 successes very well could have been people that he was talking to at Towns Hospital before he met Dr. Bob. We don't know that, but I hope we find out someday. But regards to the specifics of Dr. Bob, I'd have to go get my notes and do some homework to give you a better answer.
Hello.
Thank you.
How are you?
Sorry about that. I was wrapping up.
We'll have to mute Kay there. Bernadette, is that you good, Bernadette?
Yes. Absolutely. I apologize for throwing that in. It's just I wondered if there was continued medication, but Dr. Bob was sort of a sauerkraut, and what else did he had in sauerkraut and something else?
They did tomatoes,
Formaldehyde.
Yeah.
Garo syrup.
The kids would report that the house smelled like formaldehyde, and that's how they knew they had to go to the attic.
Garo syrup was part of it too.
Oh, okay.
But formaldehyde was the sedative.
That's Chris J talking, if anyone's listening, and we're also listening to John K jumping in there. Thank you guys for that. We've got Tim. Hello, Tim. Nice to see you, sir.
Gary, I was surprised that belladonna is available to be ordered in the U.S. as a supplement. I know that belladonna was being used somewhat as a avoidance of the effect of delirious tremens in the early days. It's certainly not used for that anymore, right? There are other drugs that the treatment centers administer. But do you have any idea why there are people in the insane world of supplements that are still buying and using belladonna, and why they're doing that?
Don't have the foggiest. I think I've grown across one person that took some sort of belladonna in capsule form for a little while, but I don't think it did anything. When I Googled belladonna on the internet, there are occasional products that you can buy. I don't know what they claim they're supposed to be doing for you, but it's not that many, and it doesn't seem to have much of a following, and the stuff is cheap too. I mean, it is a weed.
Yeah, it's a relative of the tomato plant, so it's like you can grow it and make all of it you want, but it's kind of dangerous.
Thank you, Tim. And just to say, if you want to contact Gary, his email is in the chat. Thank you, Rob. It's morningmael@yahoo.com. And we're going to Lola. Nice to have you here, Lola.
Hi, David. Yeah, so belladonna, well, let me go back to the beginning. Back in the 1800s and early 1900s, homeopathy was the medicine of choice it was medicine of choice. And the Queen herself had her own homeopath. And in homeopathy, belladonna is one of the remedies. There's such a minute amount of belladonna in the remedy that if you put it under a microscope, you wouldn't see anything. But it works on an energy level of, I don't know how it works, but it's generally taken by people who have this sudden onset of like severe, like a headache or like a severe sickness suddenly hits and it works really well with children. It seems to alleviate the headaches and the fevers and so forth, not to be taken daily, but as needed. And so it's a hugely useful remedy. I've taken it 2 or 3 times myself, but you just take this minute little pill and it's smaller than anything I've ever seen. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
By the way, Gary, did you see any reference to that? Because belladonna is very commonly used among homeopaths and lay homeopaths and naturopaths and so forth because of the potency, the dramatic effect it has on the body. But you didn't see that used. It could have very well been used at that time because homeopathy has continued to be used in America and overseas. It's quite the medicinal choice well, at least in England. I don't know. Maybe someone can correct me on that, but the Queen and the King and all them, they have their very own homeopaths. And the fact that I've been using it through my sobriety for decades, because I'm terrified of using anything that would cause me addiction again. That fact, I'm wondering if indeed the references you've seen about belladonna may be really in reference to homeopathically prepared belladonna, which is not the same thing. Well, I mean, it has like a little, I mean, for me to explain it would take a little while, but suffice it to say, you wouldn't find anything in the homeopathic pill if you put it under a microscope.
Well, in some regards, you're telling me something that I didn't know, which I thank you very much for. At the same time, I don't believe that you ended up in the treatment center because you took too much belladonna.
Oh, no, I drank. Ha ha. And I didn't go to treatment. That was pre-treatment. Got it?
Yeah, well, that's what we're talking about. In other words, that's why the PhD that I know is a good friend of mine, and also he doesn't even bother to list the deliriants because, at least in his experience, nobody's doing them. Now, he's not a homeopath like you are, and I'm glad to hear. But what you're talking about is in your own terms is minute amounts, and they're having a positive effect. So apparently atropine or scopolamine are as part of the treatment are treating whatever condition that you're requiring and doing so successfully. But doing, in your own words, such a minute amount is if you could barely even detect. Now here you go. But I in no way, shape, or form we're dealing with homeopathic applications. We're dealing here with a 50-hour puke and purge.
I figured as much, but I really would say that in reference to the person who spoke prior to me, because he was saying, why are we, was it even being used? Why is it being used? And that's the context which I was trying to respond to.
Thank you.
Great presentation.
Thank you, Lola. I think Jim M is trying to. Jim, were you waving at us to get in, or were you just waving in general? Or you just went? Okay, Jim. Thank you. Did Marty want to come in? Marty, did you want to come in? Marty M? Maybe not. But I have. Yeah.
Marty, hi everybody. I'm Marty.
Hi, Marty.
I'm
Hi.
Yeah, and Gary, I'm a retired physician, and I used to be a medicinal chemist. I made drugs for Bristol Myers, and I'm fascinated by all of this. I would love to chat with you and help you out with some of the information you made comments with regard to, and questions. And I actually live right near the National Library of Medicine, just outside of DC. And, so we'll have to hook up. But one of the things I did note was that in the list of all the medications was phenobarbital. And phenobarbital is an anti-seizure medication, and which is one of the number one things that status epilepticus, continuous seizures, are what kill alcoholics in DTs, in withdrawing. So I'm happy to see that at least they were giving them that, so it wouldn't cause that, because I can't imagine the combination of drugs that you indicated they were taking. It's just mind-boggling to me. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marty. Wonderful stuff. I think Gabby D might want. Gabby, would you please come in? And I'd love to hear what you have to say, my dear. Thank you.
Well, I don't want to interrupt inappropriately, Gabby. Alcoholic here, and other hats I wear. One is anthropologist. I was a park ranger at Wupatki National Monument for a time, and I learned that the belladonna, sacred datura, it's also called, or a derivative thereof, is used by Native Americans for medicinal purposes, anesthesia and painkiller, but it's also used, if properly prepared, for religious ceremonies, spiritual ceremonies, because it does have a hallucinogenic effect and gets you in touch with what is believed to be God, higher power, in that other realm of vibratory whatever universe. And I say this only because I tried it. Being an alcoholic, I'll try anything. See a little white pill on an airport floor and I'll pick it up and give it a shot. But you have to prepare it right, because if you don't, you do have the delirium effect of it. And in my case, I saw snakes crawling all over my steering wheel. Why I was driving and taking this, I don't know. But like I say, I'm an alcoholic. But, yeah, it's around, and it is used by native populations. At maybe here nor there for our recovery today. But, and fine, I'll close with this. Thank God, Bill came away with something where you didn't have to take a treatment like this, that we could do it by simply following the principles of the program and find something greater than myself. Thanks.
Thank you, Gabby. And Gabby, if I may say, is an anthropologist, I believe, as well. So thank you. I just share that for just great, got more depth and weight and gravitas, that information. Thank you very much. And we'll go to Jill McGovern.
Am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can indeed. Yes, Jill.
Okay, good. I just have a question. Thank you again for a great presentation. But somebody tell me when it was exactly that, if it's recorded or anybody has knowledge, exactly when did Bill Wilson have that bright light moment, hot flash? Was it first night, second night, third night? Where was he in the lineup? In the big book when I read it, Ebby, my friend came to see me. I would suppose that was again a few days later. I don't know.
Well, Glenn has it as the 14th of December. I believe I've read the 15th as being very plausible, or it could have been the night of the 14th into the morning of the 15th, for all I know. But that's as good as an answer as I can give you. Obviously, people very commonly see the admission statement when he was admitted on the 11th of December and he was out on the 18th. So, the 14th or the 15th seems to be very plausible, but I can't give you a medicinal record. It may be possible that someday we might come across such a thing. But I have hopes that, the author, the Dale Mitchell, being able to come across Silkworth's treatment 1152 suggests that there might be treatments of 1151 previous to that. That would be an absolute gold mine for learning about what was really going on at Towns Hospital under Silkworth's direction. But until that day comes, we just can do the best we can and hypothesize. I can't give you a better answer than the 14th, according to Chestnut, or 15th, depending upon who you read.
And I always thought belladonna was like Valium. And what I'm hearing is it's nowhere like Valium. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. I'm going to a good friend, Bob Hickey.
Yeah, when I was in treatment, there was 2 teenagers in there, and they told me, or they told everybody during one of the sessions, that they would, if they couldn't get marijuana, they would harvest Jimson weed and smoke that. So, and they did it more than once by what they were saying. But we had an archivist in Richmond, Virginia, that came across a bottle of belladonna from the 30s. I don't know where he got it. It's in their archives. And he used to like to always show that when he did a display. Thanks. Good presentation, Gary.
That sounds like alcohol sucking all anything at all,
Yep.
Thank you, Bob. Bob, you've got a presentation coming up, haven't you, on with Jim Worley, isn't that right?
Yep, on the 15th, we're going to be talking about Fritz Mayo, number 3 AA in New York.
Good stuff. Thank you, Bob. And we're going to Brad R. Hello, Brad.
Hi there. I just had a quick question. The belladonna, is that an herb, or I thought maybe it was like a mixture of like nightshade and henbane and some other stuff.
As I understand, belladonna is just it's a weed that grows in temperate climates, and it both in the United States and in Europe, and it's been around a long time and has been used for a variety of purposes. But I don't know if I could recognize it if I saw it. So I'm not that good in terms of what it would actually look like, or whether or not I got some growing in my backyard.
We had it all around our house when I was growing up. It's deadly nightshade.
Good stuff, guys. Thank you. I'm going to Chris Johnson. Hello, Chris. He's in Ohio.
Good afternoon. Gary, thank you. I've been really looking forward to this presentation. I really always like to believe that this, when we discuss something complex and new information that you've presented here, it's always good to start with the familiar. And if we look at our big books in the doctor's opinion, it says, we doctors have realized for a long time that some form of moral psychology was of urgent importance to alcoholics, but its application presented difficulties beyond our conception. And then, Schauberg points out that moral psychology term is used really without a lot of explanation. And that 1937 journal article that you reference really does give us some explanation of what Dr. Silkworth meant by this. And he talks about how the egotism of the alcoholic is reduced, and the person whose ideas had at one time centered entirely upon himself begins to think of how he might help others. And that idea that this egotism is so much a part of my problem. In my neighborhood, they refer to the ego as edging God out. And I would say, Gary, that you've helped us come a long way today to edging God back in. Thank you.
Wow. Good stuff, Chris. Lovely. I think that's a nice place to finish on. Gary, would you like to, good stuff, Gary. Thank you. Gary, would you like to tell us what's happening with the King Charles book? I think it's going into a second edition or something about that. Jim Worley was saying to us earlier. Would you? Yeah.
Hopefully by the end of the summer, if I stop getting all this new material. That's the difficulty with it, is I just keep on getting new things to put into the book. Well, hopefully by the end of the summer. But thanks for the plug there.
No, pleasure. It's wonderful. Great. I really enjoyed learning more about that Charles Towns and the hospital that Wilson was in. Thank you very much for putting that together. So we'll go back to Gary to close the meeting for us. Thank you, Gary. On the way you're choosing.
All right, but the serenity prayer is fine with me. God, grant me the
serenity
to accept
things that cannot change,
the courage to change things that can,
the wisdom to
know the difference.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Gary Nyhart.
Thank you, Gary.
Bill and Belladonna.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
illuminating. Thank you, Gary.
Have a great week. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Gary.
And thank you, David, for being such a gracious host.
Oh, thank you, Gary. Lovely to have you here. You.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah.
Have a great weekend. Bye, David. See you
Bye,
soon.
Bobette.
Bye.
See
Bye,
you.
everybody. God bless.
Thank you, Kathy.
I gotta go to dinner.
Thanks, Gary. Really appreciate that. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. I feel refreshed. I feel uplifted. As if a clean wind has flew through me. I'm nearly that good. Wonderful stuff.
I wanted to ask Marty, do you have Gary's email?
Yes, we've done that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I think
I passed on Marty's.
You were the manna from heaven that dropped into his lap today. You heard him put his bread on the water, asking for help, and you spoke up. And that's what we do. That's what we do in this fellowship.
It's just so fascinating. It's so fascinating. I remember being in rehab and I was in a program for physicians, and I of course was so self-directed. I thought I was the only one who ever had a problem, and here I am with like 30 of them. And, well, not quite that many, but, and we were all talking about, it was the belladonna. It was the belladonna that caused that white light experience, and then to find out that we don't even know. And it doesn't seem like that was the case. But I don't know how great a person's recollection is as they go through the DTs. No matter what their treatment is. And I think that's really important to know too. And I'm wondering what, if any, records were ever kept from Towns Hospital.
It's a bit of a challenge because the even in those days, while you didn't have HIPAA, there was an emphasis on privacy. That was part of why Towns was able to attract the high dollar clients.
Certainly.
And yes. Yeah,
everybody have a good evening.
Thanks, Bob. Good to see you.
Too. Thanks.
Good to be seen.
Marty, we look forward to that presentation that you're going to do, Marty.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure there's something there. There's something there.
It's fascinating. It really is. It is.
Isn't it really? Go on, my dear.
Hydrate is what they slip into women's drinks and do the date raping with, you know?
You can. Yeah, they make you pen.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is, looking at this. Yeah, and the treatment today now is we give banana bags, which are all the vitamins that the nutritional deficiencies that alcoholics come in with, are horrific. You lose function of your neurological systems. A lot of people can't walk, they don't have sensation, and then it's because of vitamin deficiencies. But I just find it fascinating. I love it. So I look forward to getting in touch with them and chatting with them. We'll see. Time will tell.
Time will tell. Thanks, Marty.
Thank you so much, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Sunday, yeah.
Sunday. Same thing. I remember I told you I came in on Saturday and go, where's everybody? Okay,
I nearly done it myself. Don't forget, I nearly done it myself. Don't worry about it.
Have a good one, everybody. Have a nice evening.
God bless. Thank you.
A couple more meetings. Bye-bye now.
Let's stop the recording.
Well.
Thank you, Chris. We're looking forward to your presentation too, Chris. I remember when it's coming up.
August. Early August. Rob
yeah.
flashed it. It's in early August. I needed the reminder, so thank you, Rob. Be well. Bye-bye.
Good stuff. Let's stop the recording at that point.